Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Trek Lower Decks Season 3, Episode 5, Reflections. This video is part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Lower Decks, so I have to start with a nice little spoiler warning for Lower Decks up to Season 3, Episode 5. If you have not seen this video, you will not... if you have not seen the episode, you will not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. Lower Decks, latest episode, it was pretty good. I pretty much enjoyed this episode. Didn't knock me out, didn't think it was like the best thing ever, the funniest thing ever, but it was interesting character work, and there was enough jokes in here to keep me occupied, so I thought it was a pretty solid episode of Lower Decks, and just to let you know, it's only a game. Sorry. Anyway, I'll get to that. So we got two storylines basically in this episode. We got the one with Rutherford, which someone had mentioned earlier that Boimler got a good character story this season, and Mariner got a good character story this season, and Tendi got a good character story this season, but Rutherford is yet to have one, and here we go. We get the big Rutherford episode, which I think explores his character and his history and backstory definitely more than we've got so far, more than any other episode did, and I like that. I think, granted, I don't think this storyline was the funniest thing ever, but I thought it was really interesting in terms of storytelling. It certainly deepens the lore behind Lower Decks, which some people may think is a bad thing, because the Lower Deckers are meant to be kind of mediocrity and not that interesting, which is why they're Lower Deckers, and kind of the point of the show is that these are the lower tier ensigns that no one really cares about, and so some people might not prefer them giving this big mysterious backstory, but I do. I like it. And this was definitely something that was hinted at in previous seasons, that they're touching more on in this episode, which I thought was interesting. Now, it does start with the very stereotypical story that we get that we've gotten in Star Trek a billion times before, where someone evil takes over our main character's body. And it's usually like an alien, and so I do like how they did call that out, where the good Rutherford, or shall we say the present day Rutherford, was like, oh, an alien's taking over my body, and then the other, the, shall we say, younger Rutherford was like, what? I'm not an alien, you're an alien. That was really interesting, but it did kind of play like your stereotypical Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde story, which Star Trek has done several times, where we get the evil version. I'm not talking about like Mirror Universe evil, but someone within their own body is acting out a character and is doing things that might harm the real character that we're familiar with. Now, to be clear, of course, both versions of Rutherford are real, which we find out later on. So when the evil Rutherford, I'll just call him, I know he's not evil, but just for clarity's sake, when the evil Rutherford was like, hitting on, I think Barnes is their name, which they've actually been on dates before. I was like, we've been on 4 dates before, you don't remember? Like, that was funny. When he, the good Rutherford accidentally mentioned Tendi, and he was like, oh, Tendi, and he goes and messes with her and tries to pretend to be modern day Rutherford, and is like, oh, golly gee. I like how modern day Rutherford was like, oh, she's going to spot that right away, and she didn't. But of course, the good Rutherford started hitting the implant, which was, affected the evil Rutherford. And so that's when Tendi started to notice something was wrong, and her first reaction was to call security. And I like how a nice little callback was Shax calling him Baby Bear, and I love how he was like, Baby Bear, that's my nickname. And how he was able to knock him out and phaser him, and this led to a medical emergency. And so then we get these psychedelic scenes with them inside the head, something again Star Trek's done a lot before, but it kind of, this is when we get the big reveal that this isn't the evil Rutherford, it's actually just a younger version of himself, because he had erased all of his memories and had no memory of his youth, and so he was practically a totally different person. And since the implant had came in, he became a totally different person. And it's a stereotypical thing where they had to battle that, and only one can take control of the body, which I thought was a bit stereotypical. And then they decide to, decide who gets the body by doing a space race, which I have very bad connotations as far as space races go. Episodes like Drive from Voyager, which are freaking terrible. But this actually didn't, even though I'm like predisposed to not liking space races and think it was a bit silly, I'm more willing to go with it because it's Lower Decks, and it wasn't actually too bad, because the whole point was to try to prove he was the better engineer, but the younger version thought he had the leg up on the older version because he was more into racing and building things, or race ships specifically, than the older version of Rutherford were. And the older version just built the Delta Flyer. Which is kind of funny how he mentioned, what, Tom Paris built this ship and it's great. And I like how the young Rutherford just was like, oh, it's just a shuttlecraft with a paint job. Because that's always what I thought the Delta Flyer was. I thought the Delta Flyer was so dumb. And so, I did find that funny. I did really appreciate that. But when they got the raise, of course, it's kind of cliche, but it works for the episode, where the older Rutherford proved that he became a better person through Starfleet and through his friends, and so he conjured versions of his friends to help him through, and just shows just how much he grew, and that he was able to. The whole thing about Romulan ship being there seemed a bit crazy, but whatever. And so he was able to go through, and he even tried to save the younger version of himself, and isn't there some way we could share the body, which I feel like there should be, but apparently there isn't. But then the younger one brings up the bigger conspiracy that he was kind of working for some shady admiral, and there was an accident, and the admiral is the one who ordered the implant and ordered his memories erased, and said just make him think that it was his own choice to get the implant, but really it wasn't. So there's this bigger conspiracy, and we see when Rutherford goes back to his old self, he's trying to look up who the admiral is, but he just can't tell because there's so many. So this is a storyline that will probably be followed up on in the future, and I think it's really interesting. I think it really fleshes out the character, and I don't think it's I wouldn't call it a retcon, because I think they did kind of hint at this earlier, which is good, unlike the Bashir Genetic Engineer bullshit, which it didn't hint at all. It actually contradicts earlier seasons. But this, I think they have always hinted that there was something up with his implant, and there was a deeper mystery to his past, which he can't remember. And so I think this fits perfectly. I think it makes him more interesting, and I think it will lead to greater mysteries going forward. So I look forward to this touching on this storyline again. So the other storyline we get this episode is more the comic relief, which I actually found really funny, where Mariner and Boimler go to a Starfleet recruiting booth at some kind of recruiting fair, and then there's other people who are just being antagonistic towards Starfleet. I kind of like that archaeologist girl who's making all these snide remarks about, oh, well, go ahead and join Starfleet if you want to get assimilated by the Borg. And stuff like that. And how, of course, Mariner was, like, warned by Ransom that she has to stay in the booth, or otherwise she's gonna. I like this Starbase 80 thing. I don't know if I ever remember this being referenced before. We're gonna send you the Starbase 80. No, not that. Which is weird. So she's like having to be very careful not to lose her temper and not to leave, and she keeps wanting to leave to kick other people's asses. And we get like the I like how the conspiracy theory nut jobs come up. It was like, oh, it's a conspiracy theory nut job. And they was like, oh, on that time where Starfleet was taken over by these bugs that controlled people. And they were like, no, that's not true. And the other one's like, yeah, actually, that did happen. Because, of course, that's referencing the Next Generation episode Conspiracy. So it's funny because, yeah, last time they had these conspiracy theory nut jobs, the conspiracies were ridiculous, but this time one actually happened. And that episode was actually called Conspiracy. So that was funny. But, of course, you know, the whole time Mariner was trying to lose her temper and Boimler's there to calm her. But then when someone, like, took Boimler's pip and, like, threw it on the ground, he, like, lost his shit and went on his rant and started yelling, which was hilarious. His whole rant, I can't remember, there was like tons of Easter eggs in his little rant, but the one thing that stuck out to me the most was when he went up to those God, I can't even remember what they're called, the I want to say the Yachty, or I can't remember, something like that. The dudes from Move Along Home, whom I recognized immediately, that had a booth. Now, why do people who live in the Gamma Quadrant having a booth in the Alpha Quadrant? I don't know. Maybe the relations there between the Alpha and Gamma Quadrant are better now that the Dominion War is over. But they have their own booth there, and the Wadi, that's what they're called, the Wadi. Anyway, they have their own booth. And he went up to and yelled at them, and stop trapping people in games! Oh, God. I lost my shit on that one. I love how we didn't see them before or after. It was just for that one. They just pop out of nowhere so you can go and yell at them. Oh, man, I love that, and I loved his ranting. And, of course, it's kind of the sitcom trope where, you know, the person you think is going to lose their temper is actually fine, and it's the one who is supposed to be calming them down who loses their temper. They did the same thing in The Trouble with Triples when Chekhov was going to attack this Klingon guy for insulting him, and Scotty was calming him down. It's like, it's okay, Wheatless, it's okay. And then the guy says something to Scotty to piss him off, and Scotty's the one who starts the fight. It's pretty much the same kind of deal here. But I thought it worked. I thought it was hilarious, as a matter of fact. And then when they get back to the ship, Ransom puts Boimler in the brig, and he's like, oh, I've never been in the brig before. But Ransom actually says, oh, I have a lot of respect for you. It must have been great telling those people off. Tell me all about it after your day in the brig. So Boimler kind of got something out of that. He's kind of moving up by losing control, not being so much of a suck up, and actually getting in trouble might actually help him. So I think that's very interesting. But then we see that Mariner is like in contact with that archaeology lady who reminds me a lot of Vash, but a much younger version. But I don't know. So, and she's like was gonna delete the contact and saved it because she kept egging her on about leaving Starfleet. She's like, yeah, right, I'm not leaving Starfleet. But then she looked on the distance as Cerritos going to warp, and it seemed like maybe she was starting to. Maybe the archaeology lady got under her skin, and maybe she was starting to question if Starfleet was the right place for her. So I wonder if they were going to go anywhere with this storyline. I think this could go in interesting places should they choose to continue it. But if they never follow up on this too, I wouldn't really mind that much either. But we'll see. I'm open. So anyway, my rating for Reflections out of 10 is going to be an 8. Extremely good. This may be my favorite episode of the season. I can't remember off the top of my head right now the other episodes or how much I liked them, but it's definitely one of my favorites. I think it was very solid. I think it was a great character story for Rutherford with some humor in it. But the B plot, of course, I thought was just hilarious. So overall, a solid episode. So that's it for my review of Star Trek Lower Decks Season 3, Episode 5. I shall be back next week and every week thereafter to cover Star Trek Lower Decks. I also do reviews for House of the Dragon every Monday night. That is a live stream that you can join in the chat. And also do reviews for Lord of the Rings of Power, and many more videos on Star Trek and other shows. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.